Hello, welcome to the definitive top 5 anime of all time, with different opinions. With me I have today, Kor Reviews.
Hello.
And Hiding in Public.
Hey, subscribe to Evanito.
And me, not Evanito, but Urban. Alright, so we're going to be basically talking about our top 5, figure out what that says about us and all that. Because it'd be fun.
Personality test?
Yes, exactly. Before we start, do you guys want to say anything about your channels or yourselves or anything like that?
No.
Okay, cool.
I'm first things first. I am a musician. And I'm
I agree.
depressed. That's pretty much anything anybody ever gets from me is that I'm depressed. So.
We'll see if your top 5 reflects that. It might.
Yeah. It just might.
Speaking of which, I think we'll do this in alphabetical order. Start with Hiding. What is your 5th anime in your top 5?
Okay. So, my first of my top 5. I normally jump around whenever I say like, oh yeah, I like this one, I like that one. Normally I say like Lucky Stars in there, but I'm going from my score. What have I scored? So number 5 for me, counting down on my little list here, is Fully Cooley. That's number 5 for me.
Ooh.
Not all that controversial opinion, I feel like, but I don't care. You know,
No,
that's what I feel like.
It's good. I just watched it recently. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Why would you say you love Fully Cooley so much, man?
Well, I didn't know I did at first. I watched it. I thought it was, phenomenal. I thought it was awesome. But I just like, as it's kind of marinated, so to speak, on my mind, and I've thought about it more, like it's just impressive for all the reasons that anybody ever says, is that just like the amount of interesting directing chops, the, split second momentum, just the amount of information they pack into every second is pretty much unparalleled. I can't think of a single series that like per second crams in so much plot, exposition, and I guess meaning than Fully Cooley. And also the sort of, I don't want to say coming of age. I'm just going to repeat coming of age through the podcast if I say it, because everybody always just says, oh, I like it's a coming of age. It is those sort of elements, though, that are really well represented.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nina Mori is best girl. That's just a fact. Objective fact.
I have a hard time arguing with that, yeah. I kind of have a hard time arguing with that.
Specifically, I think episode 3, Fully Cooley, the Nina Mori arc episode, is one of the best put together, directed, paced, everything's that I've seen in a single episode of anime. I don't know. It's good. It's got a nice style. The soundtrack is literally like the Japanese version of what I actually listen to in real life. So, I mean,
that's fair.
It's just me. It reflects my real life kind of self a lot more than an average anime does.
All right, man. Is that all you gotta say?
I guess. I'm not trying to hog too much time.
That's cool. We have like a bunch of anime to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, Kor. What is your 5th most favorite anime?
All right. So first, it's Hot Oki, and I'm gonna go with season 1 plus 2 plus the movie, because it's like it's all one entity in my mind, at least. I do want to give a brief shout out to the show that's getting bumped off in its place, which is Silver Spoon, the first season and the second season, purely because Haruhi is visually better on like every level, because I like them kind of equally, but Haruhi is just like has the visual leg up. It's KyoAni instead of A1 Pictures.
That's fair.
But the reason I like Haruhi so much is that it's just kind of got the perfect cast of characters. Like I love, especially Kyon and Haruhi herself, are really like what makes it so good. And even though people like gripe that it kind of started this whole, you know, trend of hyper meta light novel adaptations, Haruhi is still the best one. I don't think anything has topped it or ever will. It's got such a great sense of humor, and even though it's has this sort of like meta sensibility to it, it never goes so far with it where it's like a lot of shows you see now, you're just like sort of groaning because it's like, okay, we get it, you're self-aware, but you're still doing the thing.
Did you guys realize we're in an anime?
Yeah. Just because you say I get it, just because you call the tsundere a tsundere doesn't
and then
like,
she looks
make
at the
them
camera.
less of a trope.
Oh my god.
But yeah, it's I love the cast so much, and it's one of those shows that sort of breaks the boundary of like you think of them as characters. Like the characters in Haruhi don't feel like characters. They feel like real people. Even though they're really absurd, I think that just sort of sells them as individuals so much more because they don't really fit into like a sort of easily boxed identity. They're very unique. Yeah, the show especially captures such a great sense of atmosphere. If like I love the shot composition throughout. There's just so many creative ways it shows you the setting, even though the setting isn't, you know, a very grand or interesting one. It's just a club room. It consistently sort of gives you this feeling of, you know, getting a window into these characters' lives, and that they would still be operating even if you weren't there. Sort of like it's not you're like a passive spectator, not that it's necessarily being constructed solely for you, which makes the characters feel all the more like real and lifelike. And they're great, and I love them. And soundtrack is delightful. It has a great sense of atmosphere. Like that's my favorite episode of the whole series is Some Day in the Rain, which is the last episode of season 2 before the movie. If we're going by the only real order, which is chronological order, fight me. It's because literally nothing happens in this episode. It's just the characters in this room sort of just like chilling out, and that's why it's perfect. Yeah, that's how I feel about Haruhi.
Hell yeah. I actually still need to watch Haruhi. That's one of my like anime sins that I need to correct.
Yeah. You've been amending a lot of them recently.
Yes, I'm trying to grind through a bunch of stuff. Despite that, though, still in my top 5 at number 5 is going to be Heaven's Lost Property. I know it's going to raise some eyebrows if you haven't watched it and you just look at what it is.
This whole podcast is going to be people going, yes, hiding. Yes, core. Urban, what?
No, serious. I have like 2 really weird picks in this, but Heaven's Lost Property is the first one. The reason I think it's like legitimately really good is because its characters, while they start out as more tropey, they just kind of build upon that and gradually develop as it goes on. It's just really natural character development that feels like rewarding to experience, I guess. There's like a lot of subtleties, especially with like Icarus, specifically talking about the dub. She's not really aware of how to act more human-like because she's an angeloid, a cyborg, essentially. So there's a moment that I always think of when I think about this. It's like she's looking at Tomoki as he sleeps, and he just wakes up in the night. And he's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Yes." Like, yes isn't an answer. No. And that like really sums up like what her character is for like the first part of it. And like every character has like little moments like that. I love Tomoki specifically because he's not really supposed to be a likable character at first. He's really annoying. He's a pervert. He's kind of a dick at times, but at the same time, like you like sympathize and then eventually empathize with how he is as a person, and you understand why he behaves the way he does. Not to mention it really just drives the comedy. which a lot of it is really just perverted stuff, but at the same time, like, some of the funnier sequences are in concept perverted, but like not really. Like the whole flying penny scene, that's probably like the one thing everybody does know about the show, because it's it's been kind of like memed in the past. It's a really good sequence, though. I love it. Also speaks to my love for more absurdist comedy, just kind of over the top stuff. Makes me think I'll like stuff like Gintama whenever I get to that. And yeah, I'm actually legitimately surprised how much polish goes into this series. Like, I don't notice any like moments where it looks bad. It looks really good the whole time. They also do little things like every ED is its own different song and sequence, and you could just feel there's like a lot of love and care that went into the anime specifically, until a certain point, but we don't talk about those times. So yeah, I think the reason it still sticks in my top 5 though is it's one of the first anime I really like fell in love with, I guess. It just really connected with me on a like comedic level, and then eventually like seduced me into caring about these characters and seeing how they would turn out. And I can't really think of a massive complaint I have about the series aside from when it doesn't adapt from the manga well, which doesn't happen till like the end of season 2. Yeah, I don't know. It's really underrated. I suggest watching it. Just keep in mind there's boobies and stuff. Starts out really tropey. But yeah, I don't know. That's like the hardest one to explain. I need to do a video on it at some point. But
beware, all 2 of you who don't like boobs. There's boobs in the show.
Trust me, that's enough to detract just so many people. I've come to learn.
Sounds so sad.
I am sad. It's not respected because of what it is. Anyway, what would you have to say is your 4th anime?
Well,
hiding.
Just to make this seem a little less segmented, I do want to comment on Kor's thing, or more add to it, because Haruhi is also a show that isn't quite in my top 5, but it's knocking around. Mention. At least the first season in the movie. Like the movie, I have ranked higher than some of my top 5, and the first season I have just barely scraping out of it. So I kind of agree with what Kor said. I wanted to add a little bit. One of my favorite parts of Haruhi is the part that really pisses me off. And that part is whenever they're filming the movie and they get Mikuta drunk. Yeah. And like Haruhi is like low key, like kind of like trying to create an actual sexual assault for the camera. And it's like really, really screwed up. It's like, it makes your skin crawl. It's uncomfortable. And then Kyon ends up, does he slap her? Does he end up actually slapping her? I think he does.
He motions to slap her, and he's stopped by what's his name? Itsuki? Yeah.
Yeah. That disgusting. He should have. No. The amount of just tenseness in that scene, the amount of like just different emotions I feel, and they're all like negative emotions, but it's like the way that they were all put together, the directing, the pacing. I think that episode is something that a lot of people look at and they go, that's why I dropped Haruhi. I just couldn't get into it. She's such a horrible person. And it's like, yeah, that's the point of the episode.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
And
that's yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love... It's like I described that... I described that before as... It's kind of like... It's like the arc that like I hate, but that had to exist. Like there's no way the story can like function to the extent it does, because like that scene is directly responsible for the scene that comes later, which is more famous, where like he throws grass in Haruhi's face and they sort of reconcile. Like just like the moments between them, because it's really important in establishing that she has crossed the line, but she learns from it, which is the sort of like important part, and what makes her so much more interesting, because the show's not afraid to have her be genuinely just a bad person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That episode I think displays a lot of just the actual depth and reality of the characters. Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts. Anyways, I wanted to add that on because that's whenever Haruhi discussion comes up, I feel like that's one of the best like examples of the directing and acting and character everything, just the chops for everything in that series.
Yeah, and feel free to just jump in when somebody's talking about a series that you can say some stuff about if you want.
Well, I mean,
you could just do it.
So my number 4 is Sangatsu no Lion, which is wonderful. That's including the first and second season. And man, this show hits really hard. I think first, it's one of the most gorgeous, if not the most gorgeous show that Shaft has ever produced. There's lots of pretty looking shows, but a lot of that was, before they had more of a budget and before they were able to do more animation. The animation and color palette and everything is just stunning on Sangatsu, like pretty consistently. The story, the characters, this is less with, I guess, the part of the people who made the anime, but more in the people who, or in the mangaka. She wrote all the characters with the intent purpose to make sure that nobody was just a bad guy, that they were all characters with motives and perspectives, and some of those perspectives may be less or more valid, but they are always presented in a light where you can understand the logic behind it, or understand the motives, or what led them to act and behave how they do. Nobody is a villain. Everybody's a character in the world, which is how the real world is, and you never see that displayed. The type of character interaction, the type of, I want Rei to win, but oh man, I really don't want Rei to win, that goes on in the show is incredible. I love every single character. Even the most minor, just non-characters in the show are made into just absolute people that you could have just found on the street. Like, Sangatsu no Lion's amazing. The plot is really good. I don't know why people describe it as slice of life when there's a... Well, actually, never mind. Nobody knows why anybody uses slice of life. But
I know how you feel about that term.
Yeah, not go down that rabbit hole. I mean, it does have some colloquial usage, but I really don't understand why people use slice of life for Sangatsu. I don't think it fits. But just, I don't know. It does everything. It dives into the nice comf vibes that I like. Some nice comf. It dives into the just absolute, existential depression. It dives into a lot of what it means to work for something and what actual sacrifice happens beyond just the hard work on your behalf. It's one of the deepest, best fleshed out, best put together, most beautiful series that I think have been put to television. And it's criminally underrated, but in the same right, I don't really think it is.
Who's underrating Sangatsu? Come on now. I literally only hear it's a masterpiece about that show.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true.
It's just not enough of a masterpiece.
No, it's that even though so many people, pretty much everybody who's seen it, will praise it to the high heavens, nobody ever watches it. Like,
oh boy.
I remember whenever I first, was watching it, it was I don't know, 10th or something for the season when it was airing. It was very low in the list, even though it easily was blowing out of the water anything else in that season in terms of quality. And even though people were making videos on it left and right, it's no, just people weren't watching it. And that's the most amazing thing. I know, I think it was Alexander on Twitter
I think
recently.
a lot of people felt similarly about Rakugo Shinju. That was another show. Literally every AniTuber made a video on it, and still no one watched it.
Yeah. I think on Twitter recently, and I might be wrong about this person, so I'm sorry if I am, but Alexander just recently picked up Sangatsu, and he was like, this is amazing. Wow. Or not to mischaracterize him, but I'm pretty sure he liked it a lot.
That's what he sounds like when he talks.
That's totally it. That's totally it.
Wow.
This is amazing.
That's more
no,
accurate.
but and I was just like, yes, thank you for checking it out. Yes, good job, correct opinion. But yeah, Sangatsu is wonderful. The very little flaws that I think I do see with it, because it doesn't have a perfect score or anything on my list, are so minor and nitpicky that they don't detract from any of the really weighty core themes and purposes of it. Yeah, so that's my number 4. I ranted about that one a little longer because I feel like Fully Cooley's been
totally
talked to death.
Speaking of core themes.
Yes.
What do
Core
you...
Reviews, number 4.
What's next on your list, buddy?
I can get... First, I want to sort of comment on hidings, because, like, at least get some discussion going. It's a little harder with the sort of, like, segmented format
that
of
is course.
top fives, but, I guess sort of the way in, because I've seen, I watched the first season, and the first 2 or 3 episodes of season 2, and to be honest, I like Sangatsu, but I feel like I'm like the one person in the world who like watched it and didn't think it was a masterpiece. Mainly for those sort of superficial reasons you talked about. I find the directorial style to the whole thing, or like I guess would be described as the visual flow, just doesn't gel with me. It's like I don't know how to describe it. It's like listening to a piece of music that like hurts your ears almost. Like it just feels wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
I think
this is mainly I know people defend the tone shift, and I'm fine with tone shifts. But I do not care for the upbeat moments. I just find them kind of annoying. And that's my opinion of Sangatsu. It's still good though. I think the weakest
parts. I think the weakest parts are the tone shift moments. I think the first episode of season 2 is the weakest episode, at least of that whole season. Maybe not the whole series.
Maybe I should pick it back up then, because I remembered liking season 1. I mean, I had problems, but like I liked it, and everyone says or at least a lot of people were praising season 2 even more than season 1.
I think it probably was even better.
And I started watching season 2, and I was like, oh, I'm not feeling this.
Yeah. I was kind of feeling a similar way, actually, when I started season 2. But yeah, after it starts rolling into the Hina arc and the whole bullying thing, it's intense, it's amazing, it's great. And then later, they have the chairman, who's a character long-standing throughout the series, and sort of like what it means to maintain his title, something that is slowly, faded from relevance in the general public. He's older, so less people pay attention to him. But what it means, the weight of so many people who rely upon him, and the hope and the trust and the years of dedication that have built on him, and what it means to keep that up. Like, there's some really just heart-wrenchingly just like intense motives behind some of the later characters that exist all through season 1, and they get their characterization. They don't change as characters. You just understand more and more what has been driving them. Yeah, season 2 has some really intense character arcs that shift off of Rei as the protagonist. He's a member in the story. He's not the focus. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I agree, though, that the weakest parts of the show are probably the tone, at least in my opinion, are the lighter moments. But if the whole show was always like drenched in these kind of darker moments, it would be, I think, almost kind of hard to watch.
Yeah. Look, the only thing that I think is unforgivable is that they gave the cats voices. That's the only thing that I cannot forgive. I will never forgive talking animals. I hate them.
It's wonderful.
Oh my god.
Well, I guess I should actually get to my number 4 spot.
I'm guessing it's not Sangatsu.
Serial Experiments Lane. So, this is a show
that Kor made a video on. It was great.
Yeah, yes, I did. You should watch it. It's called Serial Experiments Lane. It's what my mind looks like. It's a video that I made.
A video.
This is one of those shows that's kind of infamous for being confusing and weird, which is kind of what I like. I like shows that are confusing and weird, and very aesthetic. Which is exactly what this show is. And it's one of those shows that, like, you can come back to again and again and again, and each time get something totally different from it, because it's presented very much in this sort of art house manner where the narrative is really hard to follow. And there's just a bunch of stuff that happens. Like for instance, one of the most famous ones is that there's a scene wherein Lane is walking down a hall. Suddenly she turns over and sees an alien. The alien like waves at her and then walks away, and then the show just continues. It's never explained. There are no aliens in the show outside of that. So yeah, it just happens. And throughout the show, there's a lot of, as you like on later watches, or like as you're like maybe consuming analysis or whatever, the actual like events become more clear. But I just find it very interesting because it's very much like, you know, like like what you see happening in like modernist fiction in the world of like novels or even like art house movies, where there's less of an emphasis on a very clear narrative for the sake of getting you to think about what it's saying. Like, it's sort of forcing you to think about it by way of being confusing. And it presents this really interesting perspective on the world of technology, because like at the time it was made, like this was way before that was like common knowledge or had come to be as influential, this sort of aspect of technology being so core to our lives, because the central conceit is this world of the wired, which is what all the characters are like plugging into, and it shows the different, like the good and the bad sides to it. Like Lane, who's a fairly like childish girl, I would say. She keeps to herself. She has a small group of friends, but like once she enters the wired, it's like she literally discovers a new side of herself and becomes so much more open. But there's also sort of this exploration of the negatives, like the way it affects the sort of like societal balances that happen in this digital world. It's really, really, really interesting, and still holds up today as an insightful commentary on our world. And then on top of that, the real reason I like it is because it's aesthetically one of the best things ever. The framing is masterful. Just the atmosphere it creates, it's very much this sort of dark, gritty, brooding atmosphere that I love so much. And this really heavy balance, like the show at its darkest is almost pure black, and at its brightest it's almost pure white. Like there's a very heavy emphasis on this like big contrast in light and dark, and this constant sense of sort of like an ominous like overshadowing figure. I just love the sort of weird emotional effect it creates through its like sound and directing and everything. And you can find out more in my video. Yeah.
Subscribe to Kor Reviews and Lollycore.
And Maname Matt.
Yeah, dude, Lane is something that I really need to fucking pick up, dude. I promised Renko I'd be watching Flip Flappers next, but I do want to squeeze Lane in there soon, because like those shots that were in your video, and also just, you know, random stuff I've seen from other people's videos on Lane, it just looks like so aesthetic, you know. Just I definitely like that contrast thing he's talking about. It makes like the black seem like very oppressive, you know, like it's just kind of like hanging over everything. And I really like that.
People constantly say the show is good for its time or for its budget, because it's not like the biggest produced show. Like there's a lot of still frames and stuff like that. But no, this show looks better than like every show ever, except for the 3 shows that I've scored higher than it. Or maybe no, only 2 of them. Only two of them. This show looks amazing because of its direction, and I don't think there's really any part of its visuals that there's like maybe a couple scenes here and there, but just the way it utilizes its aesthetic works perfectly well. So anyone who says it doesn't hold up is incorrect. Yes.
We only have right opinions in this podcast. Speaking of correct opinions, Hunter x Hunter is pretty good. That's my top 4 right now. This is a newer edition, not because I had any real hangups with Hunter x Hunter. There are points where I feel like the cast might be a little too big for its own good, and there are arcs that go on like too long. I'm not a huge fan of the game world thing, the Greed Island. That's what it was. But what keeps me thinking about Hunter x Hunter is what I watch it for. I don't watch it for its fights. I don't watch it for its power system, all of which are really fucking great, by the way. But I watch it because its characters seem so just human, and it just really... I love Togashi as a character writer because he just nails this, like, portraying people as real people, like, so well. Killua might be one of my favorite characters in anime, period. I love his entire arc, and I definitely relate to the whole finding your self-worth and feeling like friendship is something you owe people, and learning that what friendship actually is. It's just something that really resonates with me very well. Also, there's that whole part of his character arc in him trying to break a habit, in which case it's more literal than metaphorical, but it works on both sides, and I love it. And that's just me talking about Killua. There's so many characters in this that are fantastic. It's one of the best large casts I've seen in an anime, like, period. It might actually be the best large cast I've seen in an anime so far. Keep in mind I haven't watched like One Piece, but I don't know if I ever will. If anything, I'll read the manga. The villains in Hunter x Hunter especially are super interesting. Meruem might be my favorite villain ever. His entire arc with Komugi is just really, like, interesting and emotionally resonant. I love that there's a bit of like a need for competition in there too, and like learning to respect and love your rival, and then what that eventually escalates into, without spoiling anything. The end of the Chimera Ant arc was just it hurts to think about, but I love it. and I love that they can conclude an arc in the way they did, where it's not about the action necessarily, despite they had one of the best looking like fight scenes in an anime beforehand. I just love the way everything sort of comes to a central point in Hunter x Hunter, I guess, if that makes sense. I generally like the aesthetic. I like that it sort of creeps from this more bright story into a more darker one. It's very gradual. You don't really realize it's gotten to that point until, people start dying and things just start getting fucked to shit, for less of a better phrasing. Yeah, man, I think about Hunter x Hunter a lot now, and Togashi specifically too. And yeah, I don't think I have much else to comment on Hunter x Hunter specifically. I just really like it. So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Yeah.
Anything to add on? I feel like at least I know Hiding's watched Hunter x Hunter.
It sure is good. I don't know. That one actually. So if we're talking about scraping, technically my number 6 is Hunter x Hunter.
Okay.
So I mean, I think highly of it. I do think aesthetically I prefer Yu Hakusho, which is Togashi's other work. For the 2 people who didn't know that. But I do prefer that aesthetically, but I think the anime adaptation for Hunter x Hunter. Yikes! I almost said it. Oops.
Well, I'm talking 2010 or 2011 by the way.
Yeah. The adaptation for that is considerably better. I think. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Sure is a good show. Some good characters. I like Meruem. He's a good guy. I like Komugi. She's a little gross. It's fine.
No, she's cute.
She's snotty.
I don't care.
Oh, I don't want it on me.
You know who else is snotty? Is
her.
Chubchu, that Pokemon with the icicle drip from his
don't
nose.
You come on to me, mister. Don't you threaten me with a good time.
Chubchu? That's a child.
Stop talking about Chubs, brother. We're in a podcast. Save it for the DMs.
Oh yeah, by the way, what's your top 3 hiding? what's your third?
Oh, that's right. This was a podcast about that. I almost forgot.
Yeah. Number 3 for me. Man, this is just predictable, uninteresting picks. The podcast, other than Heaven's Lost Property, that's the only one that's like, oh, what does he have to say about that?
Yeah, I still don't even know.
No, my number 3 is Bebop. I mean,
okay.
Bebop means a lot to me. I think it says a lot with its atmosphere. A lot more with the atmosphere than it does with the actual words. Aesthetically, I know, aesthetic and realistic characters is the one thing that's being repeated like crazy, and it's going to become annoying. So I'm going to go for a different route here. So it kind of reminds me of, or whenever I watched it and stuff, it reminds me of 2 different things that I like. I really like the sort of like pioneer, Old West type of feel mixed with dystopian future, future technology, that sort of thing. I like that mixture in sort of a sort of existentialist, very nihilistic kind of dressing, but not embracing the mindset of that. I really like when shows do that. So like, to an example, if I could compare this to other mediums, I would compare a Bebop, the sort of feel, the sort of thing I like about it, as similar to Modest Mouse's The Lonesome Crowded West. It's an old album. I have it on vinyl. It's a double record vinyl. It's a great album. It's hard to get into. It's very much like an acquired taste type of thing. But there is this sort of like haunting, kind of like sparing, Old West kind of vibe to it. The idea that sort of the future is encroaching upon the existing in a way that's sort of overbearing, but that sort of sense of freedom isn't being oppressed, and that it's instead thriving through the undergirds and rusty side parts of, reality, through humanity. I hope that didn't sound too much like word salad. I was trying to say something. That's sort of how Lonesome Crowded West feels to me. Great album, Modest Mouse. It's my favorite album by them. And then also, I think, in terms of video games, for more like a light-hearted take on it, that I think still does cover this, the first Borderlands game, now Borderlands 2 might be superior in terms of gameplay.
Oh yeah, but the aesthetic of the first one is a lot more different.
Yeah, the aesthetic of the first Borderlands game, if you've never gone back and play that, it's still hilarious. It's still super comically over the top, but it's not so over the top that the whole thing is a joke, kind of. It's definitely, it takes itself seriously just a tad bit more, and there are like genuine, like kind of, I guess, lonely, kind of rustic sort of, it's a good vibe. It's a good vibe. It's a little more jokey.
Yeah.
But that sort of aesthetic, that sort of feeling of like, to put it in Camus, who was like one of the big existentialists, embracing the absurd type of thing. Borderlands definitely goes down that embrace the absurd feeling way more than something like Bebop or even Lonesome Crowded West does. But I think that they both kind of have that tinge to it. But it's the overall rejection of that. The whole like, well, this is still my life. This is still the life that we have to live and we have to decide and we determine our own agency and purpose and choice in. I think that's the really like the weight of Bebop, and I have a video planned, so I'm not going to go into exactly my favorite part, but just generally the way that the characters' choices affect them going through, how they cope with that, how they don't cope with that. It's as a character study, just laced in this sort of aesthetic and vibe that I love, is what makes Bebop 9.6 for me, and my number three spot.
Hell yeah, that's a show I have to rewatch because watching stuff on Toonami, and I don't know if it aired on Adult Swim. It might have. It was always something I saw in bits and pieces. I never like got the full in order experience of it. But I definitely appreciate like its aesthetic and its like its tone, because it felt like more lighthearted until it couldn't be. You know what I mean? And I generally like that kind of style. But you, Corey, you got any spicy takes on Cowboy Bebop? Oh, how the hell did we not mention the soundtrack? How do you not mention the soundtrack? It's so good. I just realized that.
Well, I'm trying to stay away from exactly.
That's fair. I definitely agree with Core. Yoko Kanno.
Yeah.
All right, Core. What's your third, man?
All right, number 3, Princess Kaguya. This is a Ghibli film directed by Isao Takahata, the most underrated director of all time. Yeah, I love this man's work. He's beautiful, the greatest. He's also dead, which sucks, but yeah. The main reason that Kaguya appeals to me, I guess the best way I would describe it is sort of like my viewing experience. So I was on a bit of a Ghibli kick, and I was watching a few of the films, and I was like, okay, time for Princess Kaguya. I haven't seen this yet. I was watching a bunch of Isao Takahata's other work. Like I had watched through a bunch of his World Masterpiece Theater shows, and I had seen Grave of the Fireflies and Only Yesterday, which we'll get to later. And then I was watching Kaguya. I put it on, and it's a long movie, but through the whole thing it held me. And then when I finished the movie, I literally couldn't fall asleep for like a good, because it was pretty late once I finished it. I was like, okay, I'm going right to bed. I literally couldn't fall asleep for like a good 30 minutes. For context, I'm someone who can fall asleep pretty quickly, because I was just thinking about the movie. Like, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And literally the entire month, for a good month or so afterwards, I was just constantly thinking about this film. Some of the scenes are so powerful and memorable that, like, they're ingrained in my mind. Like, I can like click the play button in my brain and just see the scene again, because this movie is visually perfect. Like, there is nothing about the visuals to this entire film that I think is bad at all. Not a single thing. Just through and through, it's got this amazing charcoal watercolor aesthetic. That I imagine was probably not easy to pull off, but it looks fantastic, and so much of the movie is just alive with movement, and even there's like moments of stylistic variety. Like the most famous scene is where she sort of dreams of running away from her responsibility, and it's like it gets super intense. Like it turns very like scratchy and like sort of sketchy, as lines are like everywhere. She's like running, she's sort of like picturing herself running away as fast as she possibly can. So just on like purely a visual level, it's maybe one of the best things I've seen. But then to top it off, it's got this really poignant melancholy to it. This was the director's final film, and it's an adaptation of a classic Japanese folk tale. And I was not particularly familiar with the folk tale before. Like, I had heard of it, but I hadn't actually like read the story. I'd seen it referenced before, but I didn't really know the story. But ultimately the conclusion is a rather somber one, and that's why I feel like it particularly leaves so much of an impact, because when the film ends, it almost feels wrong. It feels like like where's my happy ending? Where's my like nice resolution? And to an extent, that's kind of the point. I don't want to give away too much because I do plan to cover his films in greater detail in the future, but the way he sort of gets through this really simple story, he sort of gets at the heart of like this experience of being human, and sort of like the inevitable tragedy to it. But even still, like as sort of somber as the film is, it's like it's a stunningly beautiful movie, like, and that's sort of a perfect reflection of its themes. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it.
Hell yeah. It's another one I think I have that on my list of movies I'm watching this month. So hopefully people will vote it. But yeah, dude, that sounds super interesting. Also, before I start my next thing, I want to mention that I agree with Hiding that Yu Yu Hakusho looks better than Hunter x Hunter, but I didn't want to say anything because my third pick is Yu Yu Hakusho because it's fucking great.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yu Yu Hakusho is probably the most nostalgically influenced thing on my top 5. At the same time, though, I can't deny its quality. While Hunter x Hunter has like a really good like big cast, I feel like Yu Yu Hakusho nails like a smaller cast in such a better way. They have this banter and it makes these like the slower moments, like the downtime we experience with them, just really enjoyable. I think Yusuke is a fantastic sort of role model, especially since I did watch it growing up alongside
Damn it,
things like
Urameshi.
Dragon Ball Z. Yeah. Funny thing, actually. So,
Urameshi.
So just to reflect, like how real these characters feel to me. When I rewatched this series and I watched that first episode and it's Yusuke's wake, I still just get choked up. I feel like that Togashi writes characters in a way that's like so realistic, and it's painful to see like how differently they respond to someone's passing, as his mom is just kind of sitting there in the corner, just essentially like just gone, like she's just absent, and it's just heartbreaking to see that. Then you have Kuwabara breaking in and just responding in anger and just lashing out, and then the kid comes in and it's really it's really innocent and cute, and then the mom starts crying. Oh my god, that for some reason that scene, that's what sticks with me more than anything. And there's so many more scenes like that in Yu Yu Hakusho for me. I also think Toguro is possibly my favorite villain. He's so complex and interesting, and I love this
Orange
sort of
juice.
Yes, I love that he drinks orange juice. It's my favorite thing about him. No, I love that he has this sort of paradoxal viewpoint that still makes sense. Like, he wants punishment, but he also doesn't want to like lay over and die. You know what I mean? It's like, it's something that's really relatable and understandable, and it's tragic to see that he went down the road he did, even though he did immoral things like towards the latter end of his life. It's just really tragic tale, and it's one of those situations where everything's wrapped up. It's not like a triumphant feeling. It's like this sort of, I guess, melancholic just response I get from it. Also, yes, aesthetically, this show is just so goddamn stylish, especially like when I look at like that like 90s anime aesthetic. Yu Yu Hakusho is the one that sticks out to me the most. It's so like sharp and stylized. I love it. I wish I could use like more descriptive words than that, but that's what I can come up with on the spot right now. And yeah, I don't know if there's much I have to say else otherwise. I'm not too. I don't have too many strong opinions on the ending of it, though. I am glad to see Yusuke's character arc and where it lands towards the end. He feels like this very true growth, and it's just a really nice conclusion to see, if nothing else. Just to see his character arc conclude the way it does. So yeah, Yu Yu Hakusho's pretty cool.
Yep. Yu Yu Hakusho was the first manga I ever read. By pure chance.
Yeah.
And I love it. Yusuke has always kind of been like a, or well, I say always kind of been. He was kind of like a role model for me for who I could be. When I read the manga and it started out, and I was like, look at this kid. Like, him and I are different in so many different ways, but I was like, this guy is clearly like a little dipshit, kind of like I am. But then in seeing like what he grew into without losing who he was, it's like all the best parts of who he was stayed, and all the bad parts got refined and sort of worked on like a stone until he turned into the best version of himself that he could be. And it was always like a role model type of thing going on there. That's with the manga, of course. I think the anime is good. I think the anime misses out a lot on some of the manga stuff, but yeah, I love Yu Yu Hakusho. It's wonderful. It's great. I have a lot of things that I think about it that are positive things.
I need to start up a rewatch sometime soon when I'm not trying to catch up on anime that I haven't seen.
Yeah, 148 episodes. Oh my gosh.
No, it's
140. Wait, no.
It's
Yeah, it's not 148. Is
148.
yeah. I got them goosed.
It's okay.
I don't even think I got them mixed up. I think I just said the wrong word.
All right, now we're moving into the twos. What you got for us? What's the highlight of this whole podcast going to start with?
What? The highlight?
Why would 2 be the highlight?
I mean, we're moving into the highlight.
Okay. I'm gonna make a quick little deviation here. So I have one that's for 2, right? But I actually counted out what would technically be my number 2 because it's just a movie.
Oh, you can include that if you want.
Yeah, but now it jacks up my whole list. So I'm just gonna say what would be number 2 if I wasn't like excluding movies, except for movies tied to shows. So my number 2 would be Perfect Blue. It's almost perfect. It's great, wonderful movie. Satoshi Kon, good job. Okay, my number 2 show is Welcome to the NHK, which has well, I mean, the only thing that I ever really hear people bring up as a, negative, other than not liking Sato's character, which isn't really a criticism, is the very, very poor animation quality of a few of the episodes. Everybody always brings that up. Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't have it ranked as a perfect. Again, it's sort of like a pedantic thing for me. It's sort of a small detail, not really anything that I will say, some of it is so off-model and crazy that it is actually distracting from the story. But overall, I characterize it the meaning, the character interactions, the sort of weight that the show carries each of its blows with, sort of minimalizes these sort of smaller things. Even though this is probably, out of everything on my top 5, the one with the most like glaring thing that you can be like, yeah, that sure is wow, that's animated. Like, it's definitely the most out of all of the top 5 on my list that has something like that. But man, NHK, for me, NHK, I watched it my first semester of my sophomore year of college, and this was after I had my last girlfriend, and it was the first like good relationship I'd been in, like the first one that wasn't toxic or abusive or manipulative or whatever. And we broke up, and she was abroad in Chile for the semester. So even if we had stayed together, we wouldn't have seen each other for like 8 months. And so I was feeling lonely because last time I was at school, I had this super nice, positive, pretty girlfriend. And then I come back to school and it's cold and rainy and dark and horrible. NHK. And I don't have a girlfriend. And I like started binge eating like Taco Bell like more than 7 times a week. Thank God for metabolism. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, been there, man. It's catching up with me now.
It's catching up with you now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank goodness for metabolism, because I would be a wreck if I didn't have it to support me. But I really I was in a dark place. Like dark place. I'd like be like, because I was in the 8th floor of which is the top floor of the building I was in at the time. I'm no longer dorming there, but that's where I was dorming. So I'd look out of my window and I'd just like look at how far I could plummet down. Not that I was gonna jump or anything. Don't worry about me, but it was sort of like a really, really dark period. Like I just felt fucking horrible. Like I felt like I needed somebody to just knock on my door and save me. And I started watching NHK. And that's exactly how the series starts. Is this girl knocks on his door and saves him from, just living a completely garbage life, to be honest. Going down these like schizophrenic trips, which are, drug trips in the light novel and blah, 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 whatever. But he saves him from that and just the absolute isolationism. I could have just said isolation. I don't know why I added the ism.
Isms are great.
It was perfect timing, but that's not why it's on the list. It is, in my opinion. It's not just like, oh yeah, I hate that. I don't want to diminish the actual quality of the show by saying, oh yeah, it just came at a good point in my life, because no, the show is really well written, really well put together, and the lesson that it teaches is so important, I think, and so hard to listen to, especially for people who are in sort of the nerdy kind of atmosphere. The people who have these hobbies and things that are maybe more niche that they enjoy, that they don't, that they don't talk about. And sure, anime, video games, comics, stuff like that, a lot more fine to be interested in nowadays, a lot less ridiculed, but it's still not something that's quite normal.
Yeah, it's getting there, but it's not quite there yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah. And so I think that there's these people, myself included, unfortunately, to an extent, even though I try to keep myself from thinking this way, who are just like, well, I mean, there's so many millions and millions and millions and billions of people in the world. Surely there's a few people who like what I like. And you sort of fantasize about what you think that person would be like. And you don't look at the red flags whenever they come your way. Really good BoJack Horseman quote. Whenever you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. And I feel like that applies so well to the basic mentality of NHK. He is a fundamentally broken, disgusting character. There's a part, like, in the first few episodes where he tries to take pictures of, like, middle school girls, like, as they're coming out of school. Like, that's seriously screwed up. Yes. And then Misaki is just, like, this pure, innocent angel. Like, he literally, like, fantasizes about her, like, being a nun or something the first few episodes. And she's not. Because of course she isn't. She's not actually your fantasy dream girl coming in. She's not actually your, what is it? What's the film term? Pixie dream girl? What is that?
I'm not sure.
It's a certain terminology. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I've heard
right
Pixie dream girl before, though.
Yeah. So, well, there's another word that adds on to it, but yeah.
Okay.
She sort of seems to fit that. And she knows that she seems to fit that. And she manipulates that perception of herself in order to go for the means and the ends that she wants. But they aren't, at the same time, hostile. They aren't things that she's doing out of ill intent. She is equally screwed up. She just really doesn't know how to cope with that. I think another part of this series that really makes it just heavy-hitting is learning more about Misaki. There's different interpretations of her based on whether it's the manga or I'm not even sure if she's even in the light novel, basically, at all. But her interpretation in the anime is still, like, probably one of my favorites. Like, I genuinely... The amount that I relate to her character over Sato... the amount I relate to her character is just, like, heartbreaking. And yeah, I don't know. It's real. It hits me in a way that very few other things do. So that's why Welcome to the NHK is my number 2.
Hell yeah. Did you watch NHK Core?
I have not. That's one of the ones that's like, I have a strong feeling it's going to be like topping the list when I finally get around to it.
Yeah, no,
It seems like
I feel the
very
same.
much my type of thing.
Because I've only seen bits with people, but I've never like sat through the whole thing. I do hear it talked about a lot in kind of a similar way to what Hiding is describing, where people just kind of relate to this, just like this terrible point which these people are at, and how they deal with that. So just based on that alone, it's really interesting to me, especially because it doesn't look like it's totally dark the whole time, if that makes sense. Like there are
No.
jokes
There's
and
lots
stuff.
of lighthearted parts in there. Yeah. Da-da-da.
All right, Kor, what do we got for your number 2?
All right, number 2.
Da-da-da-da.
Only yesterday. So, yet again, another Ghibli's Isao Takahata movie. How about that?
Underrated director has 2 of your top 3 in it.
Yeah. This film is kind of like almost in some ways like an antithesis to Kaguya. In the sense that this film is very lighthearted, and has a very happy, like almost incredible, like almost too sweet saccharine type of ending, to it. It's got, as opposed to the very like distinct visual style of Kaguya, it's got a much more like down to earth aesthetic. It's very slow paced and just chill, and like the way it presents the world. But the reason I like it is that it sort of captures this feeling of just like going, like when you go out, when we finally emerge from our caves and go into nature like once a year, you know, as us anime watching video creators, and you kind of just take a second to take in the world around you, and experience that sensation, like the feeling itself of being alive within itself and nothing else. Like just the fact that you exist, and that's something that's worth something, that's a valuable experience in itself. The acknowledgement of your own existence and your presence within the world. Only Yesterday sort of captures that on a really experiential level. There's a scene where the main character Taiko, she's picked up because she's visiting home. Because the whole premise of the movie is it's sort of a mix of this arc of Taiko returning home to the farm. Because she moved to Tokyo, but she's visiting home to sort of reconnect. Because where she actually comes from, it's more like, you know, farmlands, like out in the country type of area. And that so her reconnecting with that, with this past, with the country which she initially sort of rejected as a child, is mixed with vignettes of little stories from her life as a child. And like when she first gets picked up by the guy who turns out to be the love interest, there's like a 10-minute car ride, and the way it's paced, it just feels like I'm watching a real moment.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe to some people would be boring,
but it feels like uncomfortable, right? Like
yeah, just sort of the way like they get in the car and he sort of like talks to her a little bit, and the way conversations really work, which is people talk for brief spurts and maybe they'll make a funny quip and chuckle, and then there's like 3 minutes of silence as they're just driving, and you just get these long like panning shots of the nature around them, and it feels so real, and it works because Taiko is a really interesting character in herself, and just the whole world is so compelling. The way it presents this sort of reflection on just the experience of being alive, I guess is how I would put it, because so much of it is centered on like her childhood experiences, and like be they happy or sad, just the way it's all paced, it feels so real, but in a way that feels so sort of overjoyed at the prospect of presenting it all. And then the character dynamics are really well written, to the point that you just love seeing these characters interact, and you want to see more of it. And the movie is just beautiful. Like I said, it goes for like a more realistic style, but it executes it brilliantly, and it also does variates it with a more stylized approach when it's going towards the childlike scenes, like when the scenes of Taiko as a child, because it's like her reflecting on the past, and so it's got this more like watercolor kind of the feeling of a memory to it. Yeah, it's very much it's an experience. I love it.
I'll probably have to put that and Tale of Kaguya in the same boat, just so I can make sure I watch one of those whenever I put that on Twitter. The way you describe this aesthetic makes me really interested. So yes, my second favorite is a bit different. Is Kill la Kill. There are many aspects about this that I absolutely adore. And it introduced me to one of my favorite aesthetics, director Hiroyuki Imaishi. The way he makes everything look. I'll get into that a little deeper because that's my favorite aspect about it. But I think, generally speaking, the cast is really solid, and I like the pacing of the series in general. I like this theme of duality it touches on, and it has so many themes it uses from like this duality perspective, in that we need both of these counterpoints to realistically move forward, and you need to accept both of these things to move forward. And it's just a message that really resonates with me. And without even going into specific themes, it's just that core part of it. It's just something I truly find a lot of value in. And I think it doesn't get enough talk, but the setting of Kill la Kill is also like super interesting to me. Like it seems like this old rustic, like this place that looks like it might belong in an older anime, but like the way it's put together in this mountain shape, it looks like so interesting and new, and it's just I love how they put like the fog on the bottom of the screen and like all these shots, and just how the wind in the background is like painted on. It looks like vicious, and it's like tearing. And just the aesthetic in general, I love how it looks in still frame and in motion. I really like what the series does with colors. I really like what the series does with different variations of animation, whether it be like 3-frame loops that are more comedic. It still suits the style. And then when there is CG that doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, like you wouldn't even know, because it's so like well done with the camera angles and everything that goes into it. The paint.
Yeah, like I just want to add on to that. Like people cite the famous like the one scene of like Satsuki
like
running up the thing, but like the thing is that scene is immediately followed by a brilliant scene that flawlessly utilizes CG for like a really beautiful action sequence.
Yeah. Kill la Kill is, I wouldn't say it's a mess, but it's definitely a collection of many things going into it. So I can see why people would look at it as a mess. I personally don't think of it as that. And it's not going to nail every element, but the parts it does nail, it's just... This show is the only show that has gotten me to shed a tear on its presentation alone. Like, nothing to do with the characters or the themes. Like, as soon as it was over, I was just like, wow, that was fucking amazing.
I'm a crybaby. Everything makes me cry. Everything reminds me of something.
I mean, well, I think most of these shows, if not all of these shows in my top 5, have gotten tears out of me. And in Kill la Kill's case, this is the most positive example. You know what I mean? Like, it's just... I was just so satisfied and happy to see how everything was put together, and it was such a fun ride the whole way through.
Some of my lowest rated shows have still gotten tears out of me. I cry at literally everything.
I mean, fair. There's stuff that's evoked tears out of me that I don't rank too high too. But yeah, like, I feel like Kill la Kill's also a series that gets talked to death. I don't think I have much to add to it because
that's the
already
nature
kind
of
been
talking
said.
about your top fives.
Well, we'll see about that when we get to the last part.
Well, it's at least gonna kick off that
For me,
way.
anyway.
12-part video series incoming.
Bump, 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 bump. That's right.
Bum, bum. Drum roll. What's hiding's number one?
Huh.
I wonder.
What do you think here?
Or should we say number two? And
No,
one?
this would be number one.
Okay.
The number 2 and number 1 are tied. I think my it would have to be Fuka, the greatest show of the year.
Yes.
Okay, let's see.
Did you?
Brother, how'd you know Suzuka is my number
I put
one?
comments next to shows that I finish sometimes on my any list, and next to Fuka, let's see what the note is. Finished this out of spite. In my number 1 show, I gave it a 1.8 out of 10. It was the worst thing I've ever completed. I hate it. Thanks.
Great.
No, my number 1.
So there you have it. Kor, what's your number one?
Obvious.
No, hiding.
Very obvious.
You can do it. I mean, to us.
Is what?
I guess to your fans too.
Yeah, obvious to.
I guess to your fan base
Probably,
too. They might
to
be
a lot
aware.
of people. Yeah, my number 1 is
That's not what I
Ava.
meant.
I say that with not too much enthusiasm because it's a fairly safe pick, but it's also the only objectively correct pick, so that's fine. I believe in all of my heart, at least based on everything I've ever seen in my entire life, that there has never been any piece of media I've consumed that has tackled as deep of themes in as nuanced and correct of a way, as logically infallible, as deep at so many different angles, so many different topics. There's a reason that this show has been talked to death for 500 million years since it came out. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, at the same time, it's hard to say in a brief summary that hasn't been said. The only thing I can say is,
Yeah, exactly.
the sentence, like it or hate it, is not something that applies to this sentence. Not a sentence that applies to this show. It's not. If you let's read the notes. You know, I talked about the note on Fuka. It said I finished it out of spite. Let's see what I put as the note on Seiki Evangelion, which is because Annulus is Romaji. If you think Ava isn't that deep, chances are you're stupid. I think that's offensive, actually.
Okay.
I'd like to amend that. Can I change it right now? No, I can't change it right now. Okay. But I'm going to amend it. If you think Ava isn't that deep, don't reproduce. That's my that's my amendment. That's my amendment, because when I think of like children that we need in the world and children that we don't, politics are crazy, viewpoints on things are crazy. I try to be as accepting of everyone as possible, but wow, having a really bad take on Evangelion, I think displays the most wrong. Anything else that I'm talking all this in jest, obviously.
No, you're not.
Before
sure.
anybody takes
No,
this
you're not,
seriously
sure.
at all. But no, I don't know. Evangelion, the commentary on the exact state of the importance of both the community and the individual, and the reason why both of those are important and to what degrees they are important. Really, in a way, it's sort of take on the meaning of life, or how at least you can obtain meaning from life. There's 100 million different levels that you can approach Ava that is just braingasm for everything. I'm a philosophy psych double major. I spend all my time basically reading into, how people work, what people have thought over the decades, over the centuries. And, it's just, it's such an encapsulation of the human experience in a way that I don't think can possibly be rivaled. That being said, I'm pairing Evangelion with End of Evangelion, not including rebuilds, not including Death and Rebirth. Death and Rebirth just reanimated stuff anyways, but I'm just including those two things as the canon for everything. Everything I'm saying I'm only applying to those two things. I give the actual show a 9.9, holding it back just because I know it's not perfect. I think that the earlier episodes, even though I can sit and justify why for like an hour, I still do think that they are a little lackluster whenever it comes to, just completely engrossing me the whole time. Exposition has to still exist in a story. And I think they did about as good as they possibly could have, but I can't say with confidence that they did it perfectly. So I'd say like maybe episodes 1 to 14, with exceptions to stuff like 3 and 4, and a few of the other more deep character building episodes, do have some probably room for improvement. I don't claim it to be a perfect series, but I think that all of that exposition and everything is worthwhile and makes up for itself, that many miles and beyond once it starts jumping into what Ava's actually about. And then the movie, I gave it 10, and it's my only 10. It's the only thing I have ranked as a perfect score, and that's because I genuinely can't think of a single thing that would improve it. There's no way to amend or rebuild it to make it any superior to how it is. I can't think of a single flaw.
Yeah.
To End of Evangelion.
I can't was pretty fucking
think
great.
of a single justifiable flaw. It's perfect. In my eyes and objectively. No.
We know what you mean. We know they're the same thing.
Good show. Yeah, totally.
No, End of Ava, so like I watched this recently, so did Kor. But I have the context of watching
very, very recently.
I have the context of watching Ava with it too.
I watched Ava like 8 months ago. I only just now watched End of Ava.
I love how it just turns into this fucking art house like masterpiece in the second half. Like it's just so encapsulating, and like all the themes it like tackles. I think it really hits the nail on the head. And there's like so much going on in there that people are still fucking talking about it to this day. and not just like us in a top 5 pick thing. Like people are still doing analysis on it. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there was literally a video released yesterday.
Yeah.
At least as of this video recording. Like, it's still very relevant. And not just because Netflix is now going to stream
now it's just going to be more relevant because of that.
Thank God.
I don't think End of Ava is part of that. I think that's still not going to be...
No, it is. End of Ava is
okay.
also being brought over.
That's good. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, could you imagine some fool watching all of Evangelion without watching the End of Ava?
I know, I can't imagine anybody doing that.
No, I just want to pop in with my 2 cents. End of Ava, it's an amazing film. Definitely one that's like, it sticks with you. Like, I just watched it recently, so it's like I'm still sort of like ruminating on its themes and like everything, because it says so much, and there's so much going on, and also like visually it's got some of the like most like disgusting visuals I've ever seen in a good way. Like it completely in a good way.
Yeah, no,
but
it's,
like
it's beautifully
it's got
gross.
like some really gross imagery that really sticks with you.
I always, whenever you say that, I always think back to specifically like slit on the character, not to spoil, the slit on the head that then turns into a vagina that opens up into an eye and then gets stabbed through. Like, Jesus.
I was thinking of some of like the muscle like contortion that you see in something like Akira, stuff like that too. Yeah, no, it's
or the scene where like also not to spoil, where they're tearing apart and one of the robots and there's like guts spewing out.
Yeah, that was actually kind of hard to watch. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I was like, these are literally vultures just tearing apart like a piece of meat that's like still alive. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna be talking about Eva forever because we just watched it recently. Kor, what do you have as your number one anime of all time?
All right. Here it is. The big boy. The big boy.
The large man.
My number one favorite anime and just favorite piece of media of all time is Haibane Renmei. This one that's more on the unusual spectrum of things, I think. I can't really think of any time I've seen anyone else with this on their favorites. Yet it's like I will recommend it to my dying day because I think it's an amazing series and that everyone should watch it. However, it does very much appeal to me personally for a lot of reasons. And it's kind of like, this is very much like, I think of End of Eva a lot, like in comparison. Like End of Eva feels like a literal brain blast from Ano. Like it feels like you are experiencing all of like the mental struggles he was going through while he was writing it, with him. Like everything is coming out, in a very sort of like from the very core of his brain type of way. Where I don't know like how many of the people listening are artists, but like when you're like going through some mental hangups or whatever and you just start making something and you're not really thinking about the process itself, you're just like expressing the core of like your mental hangups. That is literally what Haibane Renmei is, because I can cite an interview with the guy behind it, which is Yoshitoshi Abe, who was the big figure. He was also behind the character designs and like the aesthetic for Serial Experiments Lane, and he's a mangaka alongside doing like character design work. And he initially wrote like a doujin with these characters that got and that ended up getting turned into a full anime. And he described his experience of writing it as like it was sort of like an expression of just like his like core psyche. And that's very much, there's so much happening that like you can sort of interpret, but it's very much layered in this sort of veil of mystery. And like there are parts like when I finished watching the show, I knew it was my favorite thing ever, but I didn't really know why. Sure, I know a lot of reasons why it's one of my favorite things ever. I love the sort of rustic aesthetic. Like the world itself is interesting in itself, and the imagery and visuals. All the characters are really fun and enjoyable because this is one of the series that really effectively balances more dark and more uplifting moments, and that the characters are so nuanced, and because the core of it is that they wake up in these worlds with no memories of their past, but their past lives are very closely linked to their standing in this world, or at least like their relationship with this world. And it's really hard not to spoil. I'm trying so hard.
Trust me, I'm gonna have to do the same.
Yeah, but just the way it handles it is, all that is great, and the soundtrack is my favorite soundtrack ever. It's beautiful, by this guy who did the soundtrack for Shadow of Colossus, actually.
Oh shit! Now I want to watch
it
just because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, other reasons too, but yeah.
Yeah, but like, so I take all that, but that doesn't really get to the heart of why it's like my favorite thing ever. And it's like still to this day, like I have revelations about other reasons that I like it, because I feel like a lot of the time, like you consume something and you might not necessarily have like a total perception of why it resonates with you. but as you sort of get to understand yourself better and understand like where you were mentally when you watched it, like especially some of the stuff this show does with like commenting on religion, is and like self-forgiveness especially, that's a very central theme to this show that like really strongly resonated with me without me even really necessarily being fully conscious that that was like why it had such a great effect. And this show has the claim to fame of being literally the only thing that has ever made me cry tears of joy, not like sadness, but just pure joy. Yeah, it's a really beautiful work. It's only 13 episodes. Just watch it. Watch it, please. Please. It's super underrated.
I respect it. And I have to check it out at some point. Have you seen it, Hiding?
I haven't. I need to.
Oh, man.
I think it's similar in that pretty much anybody I ever hear bring up Haibane Renmei has a lot of good to say about it, but it also feels like it sort of like lives in the shadows and sort of gets the shaft. Like it is sort of underrated, like because people will be like, "Oh yeah, that's the one that looks like Serial Experiments Lain, right?" Like that's how people refer to it.
Yeah.
So, while it's not underrated, it is underrated. I might actually check that one out first.
I'm sort of conflating underrated with underwatched.
Yeah, that's what I was doing with Sangatsu.
Like, not enough people have seen it, yeah. I get that.
No, that was the exact same thing I was doing. I think that's a type of underrated, though. I'll definitely, I think I'll check out that one before. Yeah.
Maybe you're underappreciated. Maybe that's maybe people haven't seen the genius of it, and not enough people have.
People cannot.
I can relate to that, by the way.
Yeah, right. You've got a very normal pick for your number one.
Yeah, no,
and his number one is Gurren Lagann.
Well, let me, Gurren Lagann's pretty good, but it's not at all my number one. Anyway, my number one, to probably no surprise to my audience, but to maybe a surprise to people who haven't watched my content before, is Gakko Gurashi, also known as School Live in English. Let me get out the book of all the good things about it. There we go. Open that bad boy up.
I heard it.
No. Actually, what I will do, though, I sent a message to Holly that I copy-pasted and sent it to Kor after I rated this a 10 pretty recently. Let me see. Let's see. Is this one? Yeah. The reason Gakko Gurashi is a 10 is because the experience it gives me is like nothing else I've ever seen, period. First watch, it hooked me immediately. I could not put it down. It resonated with me emotionally at several points, and it ended in the most satisfying way it could, plot conveniences aside. Now, having watched it many times, it only gets better. Every episode has a ton of shots that carry so much weight with context. The slice of life meta-narrative works while also being a good slice of life show. Every character is relatable and have struggles that I can empathize with. The core themes of the show are important, presented subtly and respectfully. All of the emotional beats hit consistently and numerously. The story structure holds my attention and almost never drags, at least for me. The horror vibes are a perfect backdrop and are there for thematic purposes with emotional payoff, blah, blah, blah. TLDR, I cried more times on my last rewatch. But putting that aside, I think particular strengths of this show are in its characters, its shot composition, and its themes. Every single character, at least of the main four, that being Yuki, Miki, Kurumi, and Yuri, they have struggles that relate to me on personal levels. With Yuki, it's this sort of the desire for escapism I did a video on recently that kind of goes into that a bit more. With Miki, it's the state of being at ends with another person and seeing them sort of leave off in another direction that you don't really have much control over because you feel like you're doing the right thing. With Miki Naoki is great. Kurumi, it's being stuck in a role that you know you are the best suited for, but you're not completely comfortable being in, and you just do it because it's it's just what you have to do. It's your role to fill. And yeah, with Yuri as well, her sense of responsibility and just as well being in a role that she doesn't necessarily want to be in, but just has to be in. The fact that she can't handle that responsibility, despite being, or at least coming off as the most responsible person in the cast, is also highly resonant with me. It's an emotional roller coaster the whole way through for me. First episode, for anybody that knows about the show knows probably why that's so important and what that leads into. And coming up on episode 6, and they have another reveal that really just strikes me in the heart every time, even knowing what happens. Having that like low point that leads all the way up to the end, and stuff just starts going wrong for like the last 3 episodes, and it's just this intense like hard watch. And then by the end, I guess it started to make more sense to me as I watched it more, where there are themes of the value of memories and coping mechanisms, and the value in holding on to painful memories, as they are also able to, how should I put this? Holding on to painful memories is important so that you don't forget the good stuff that comes with it. As one of the characters forgets a very important thing to her, and is only able to remember it and find more value in that after she is able to accept all the pain that comes with that. And that's just that theme specifically hits me really hard. It also kind of preys on a fear I'm more familiar with, which is I don't fear death, but I fear how things like death and loss and failure affect other people. And I think this show captures that pretty well, and it just resonates with me so much. Like this is obviously my most biased pick, because this is stepping outside of the show itself. It's also the first anime that begged me to look into it more and analyze it and rewatch it and just find more things about it. And then you realize all of the details that they place in there. There's literally stuff like that's so subtle. Like, I'm talking like the amount of footsteps that you wouldn't be able to hear unless you had headphones in. Stuff like that. Like, it's just there's so much to pick apart, and I love it. It's I don't know if there's much else I could say at the moment without just making an entirely new video on it. But yeah, anybody that's watched my content already probably isn't that surprised, but yeah.
Episode by episode analysis coming soon to the Urbanthemyth channel.
I was not being I was not joking when I said you should do that. You should do episode commentaries. Yeah. That's real.
There is stuff in like every episode. There is like 1 or 2 weird episodes, particularly episode 9. You'll know what that is if you get to it. But yeah, like it seems like not a moment was wasted. Like there's always something going on. You cannot take scenes at face value in that show. Like there's always something to notice, whether it's in its shot composition or whether it's the props that are used and the meaning that the props have. And like I recently got like the Blu-ray like package, right? And it comes with a little booklet, right? And it confirmed a lot of things that I thought were only theories or rumors. And I was like, this is awesome. And it also introduced me to other things. Like in the title cards, they have little details in the title cards themselves for each episode that pertains to like what's going on in that episode. And it's usually the same shot. Like it'll be a desk and it'll pull back and there'll be more information there. It's like everything was there to begin with. There's just like a lot of little stuff like that. I really like it. I really wish it got more attention in general, because there's not enough videos on it beyond mine, hidings, and Digi's 3-minute video on it. and I think the best video on it is actually Pause and Select. It's older though, so it's not one of his better videos, but it's one of the best videos on Gakko Garashi. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling at this point. The point is, I like this show. It makes me cry and makes me cry for different reasons, out of pride, sadness, and happiness and acceptance. It just strikes me in every single aspect. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything to add to that. So, what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think your top 5 says about you and your taste? Before we close out.
Oh, what my top 5 says about me and my taste. I think it says a lot about what I think is important, and kind of what I grew up with, what kind of experiences I had. I guess that's general. That goes with everybody to an extent, but you know, being somebody who has always been focused towards like the big ideas, the big concepts, the sort of like, you know, how does the world work? You know, what's my place here? Type of stuff. I feel like my shows have to do with a lot of that, and then also I think that the shows that I like aren't easy. Like, they don't embrace the type of person that I am, but they're all pretty much critiques on how to become better. And I think that's linked to me a lot. A lot of me is sort of wanting to understand and not letting myself become complacent with that, with the understanding I think I have. I think it have to do with how to become the best person you can and to continue improving. And I think the shows that I have, you know, whether they be Fully Cooley, Sangatsu no Lion, Bebop, NHK, Eva, or the 2 that are technically on there but were, you know, movies and I left out, Perfect Blue and the Disappearance movie. I think a lot of I think all of them sort of have that sort of through line, is that they're all kind of character studies, and they aren't just about the character growing. It's like an assault on the character's way of life, that the character that you are isn't acceptable, and that there's good there, but there's a lot more good that could be there. And sort of learning to fight against and deny the more toxic parts of yourself in order to become a better person. I think that's what my list says about me. They reflect that sort of extremely negative, self-critical, logical, but also emotional side of me. I think they reflect sort of the sad kid that just wants, you know, somebody to knock on the door. They recognize that is me while also denying. I think all of them touch on that. I think another thing, man, something that I think a few of these shows touch into also is sort of sexual abuse and that sort of thing. With Fully Cooley, Haruko is an absolute piece of human garbage. She manipulates and abuses Naota, really, in their relationship, using his emotions to fit her higher goals, and she doesn't care about him at all. If you think so, if you think she does, which I don't think there's too many people out there who do, but I suggest you rewatch it, because half of the plot is, hey, Naota, realize she's using you. I don't care if she's using me. Ha 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 ha, I was using you. Like, that's like the whole crux for a good part of it. Where did you go? Oh, well, I was gonna leave. I decided to come back because I still need you. And not need you in the romantic way. Or Sangatsu, which has the whole stuff, especially in the first season, with sort of sister to anything sexual, but Hina and the other Kawamoto sisters, how they deal with their father leaving. And I think, Yeah, I think all of that is just very much a meditation, a sort of marination in the sort of painful realities and personal experiences, addressing where that has led me as a person, and then denying all those negative parts in a push to make me a better person or the best version of myself that I can be from those experiences. I think that's what my top 5 says about me. Maybe I took that question way too seriously.
No, it definitely works. I believe it. I don't know. What do you think, Kor? To me, it tells me that you like a lot of aesthetic stuff that looks really interesting and weird.
Yeah. So, I guess part of it is, and I've talked about this idea a little bit more. I'm deeply fascinated just by the prospect of things that are interesting. And this especially pertains to things that are weird. I love, if something's weird, I probably will like it. I love anything that's, strange and bizarre and just very out there, because it presents you with this like new experience. I'm very into that sort of idea of like, accumulating as many different experiences as possible, always trying the new food or, whatever the new experience. But deeper than that, there's very much this sort of like lens of, and I talk about this a bit in my Lane video, this interest in like the aesthetic experience, but as a lens for sort of an acknowledgement of self, in the the sort of expression of why are we even here, why are we even alive,
Just to suffer.
yeah. And then sort of a rejection in the sense that there's this finding value in the experience, in consuming life itself as a work of art, is what a lot of these works that are my favorites sort of get at. Is like, by reflecting it in art, it's sort of encouraging you to approach your life in this way of engaging with it in a very experiential level and appreciating everything that's happening around you. And a lot of it sort of reflects more personal hang-ups that I've had, especially this is present in Kaguya and Haibane Renmei. I think those two series get at a lot of like personal things, and like another series like Girls Last Tour, which I left off, but it is on the edge of my favorites list. This aspect of like finding meaning, and this aspect of like self-forgiveness, like not hating yourself, and appreciating everything, is a lot of what my favorites share in common, and all through this lens of a very distinct, sort of dark aesthetic, which I also talk about in my Lane video. You should watch it.
I actually do recommend it, by the way. I really liked it.
Thank you. But yeah, that's sort of what I love so much about anime, just animated things, is how they can craft this visual experience. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I think looking at my top 5, it's kind of weird because there's another aspect to a lot of these shows that I really like that didn't completely make it into my top 5. But what I can pick apart from my top 5 at the very least is I really appreciate like humanity represented in shows, whether that be through the characters themselves or the creator. And I tend to like when characters go on these arcs and just kind of figure things out for themselves. It's very like inspirational thing to latch onto and follow. And sometimes you can't always do that. Sometimes you do need help and assistance, and I like when that's shown as well. But going away from just the fact that I like characters more than any other aspect of storytelling, it's also I tend to like stories that sort of lure you in with more of a fun or nicer aesthetic or tone or like themes, and then they just kind of eventually get to you and either tear at your heartstrings or just, you know, strum them, I guess, you know. Like I like a show that can affect me after it lures me in to care about it, if that makes sense. That's definitely what I got from, I think, all of these shows. One of the weirder outliers is Kill la Kill, just because I really appreciate its aesthetic above everything, but there's some of that there. Like the characters of Kill la Kill specifically are fantastic, I think. And yeah, with Gakugarashi, it actually introduced me to, I wouldn't say a genre, but like certain kinds of stories that you would compare it to, like Madoka, Girls Last Tour, Made in Abyss, stuff like that. I don't know. It's hard for me to really pick apart from these top 5 specifically, but generally speaking, I tend to like characters and really creative ideas, which is presented in all of these, I believe. There's really creative ideas. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have too much to say about that. But yeah, I think we can close that out now. We've been going on for quite a bit. Thank you for joining me, people. Where can we follow you at?
Me?
Yeah, both of you.
Kor, you go first.
What? Why? You got to break the order that we've been going with this entire podcast at the end.
That's really what my work and what the work I appreciate comes down to. Break the order of your life. You know, take command, take control. So you go ahead first, Kor.
All right, okay.
Calling the shots now.
YouTube.com/c/evanet0. Thank you.
Follow him at Kor Reviews.
Yeah. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/c/Kor Reviews, or just search Kor Reviews. That's me. I'm also Kor Reviews on Twitter. If you want to follow me there, I do art and music as well. I make videos.
Hell yeah.
Also, Kor's Contemplations. I do vlogs. If you want long form content of just people talking, which is probably what you want if you made it this far into the podcast, that's what I provide. Yeah.
And where can we find you hiding?
Well, I'm a pretty big shithead on Twitter at hiding_the_in_public. Instead of in public, it's just the letter. My YouTube is Maname so please subscribe to that.
Not. Don't deceive the people.
I'm so sorry, Maname for everything I've done. I really, I'm really, if I could do anything, if I could donate to your Patreon to make you forgive me, not that I think I need to be, I love you, I just wanted to say I love you. I'm so sorry for being a cyst on your side. My YouTube channel is Hiding in Public. At the time of recording this, I just hit 7K. Yay!
Hell yeah!
Woo-hoo.
Yay! Drink to that.
Yeah, drink.
I mean, I was drinking because I was
drink.
I was
drink.
But
Drink.
I was watching The Night Is Short and I was trying to drink with it. I didn't try to keep up with her, otherwise I'd die. But
and Urbanthemyth, from the YouTube channel Urbanthemyth.
Yeah, where can they find me?
Find you?
No, where can they find me hiding?
YouTube channel Urbanthemyth on the Urbanthemyth YouTube channel. Probably the channel that this video is on.
youtube.com/c/didacticphylactery.
Oh, you know it's actually funny. My Twitter's worse than Hiding's as far as changing the names. Mine is literally urban_te, like TEH_myth.
Yeah. Also subscribe to Chibi Reviews. He's a good guy. He really just he sees. I don't really know. You know, you probably. I can't speak to your personal taste, but he's just adorable.
Chibi's a nice boy.
I love him. I've never talked to him, really, but he's probably cool. Once again, subscribe to Maname. Sorry.
Okay. And that will conclude the podcast. Hope to see you guys on here again some point. Bye.